Hello and welcome to another video. Today with the endgame setup for my Lightning Merc. I'm missing a few things here and there and can improve it even further with a lot of cash, but the build evolved quite substantially since the last time I showcased it, so I am back. The build performs very well in tier 15 to tier 16 maps on just 5 links, so it's not too expensive to get this one going. You can easily get to tier 17 or even tier 18 maps, meaning a +1 through corruption and a +1 through the irradiation. At the current I would budget this one at around 10 divines. Probably less if you keep looking and be a bit more flexible with your choices, meaning a little bit less HP. I personally just don't want to showcase a build in the range of hundreds of divines due to accessibility issues, even if it's cool to look at, but you're probably never going to play it. While this one is very easy to get into and performs very well for what you get. Also, as mentioned before, the market currently is crazy. People are requesting divines for 5 to 10x items, so it's super hard to find anything which takes out the fun and made me go solo save found for the past 15 hours. Now, as far as the build goes, it's a joy to play, it's fast, it's fun, it's Dominion, crushing maps, nuking bosses, and is very tanky to boot. Gemling allows us to focus on mostly strength, which allows us to reach around 3k life, possibly much more in later stages of the gearing process, especially with the 4th Ascendancy, which I haven't been able to get because of a bug. 3 bugs, 4 bugs, so it's basically pain to get. Not because of the power of the build, but because the trial bugs out. Also something Gemling has that other Ascendancies don't have. You can use support gems on multiple skills, the same support gems on multiple skills to add that, which is a huge boost to power and gives you so much quality of life. Lastly, I decided to change away from the grenade for shock application and went with the bow skill, which has a very good range and can proc 100% shock very easily with the setup. Anyway, let's have a look at the skill tree and see the dish that I'm trying to serve you. So let's first start with the Ascendancy. We go for gem studded as well as adaptive capabilities. Both allow us to do some really nice stuff. So it's basically doubling our strength and dexterity bonuses, so we are less likely to miss, especially versus evade mobs. That's very, very good. And we get around 400 health. Currently with the setup, we are at 207 strength. If we double that, we get around 450 additional health because of the 8% we get through the stat bonus of a boss. Currently, I'm at 2.6k. With this Ascendancy, we get to around 3.1k. With pretty decent gear, but we can do much, much better. So this build has the potential to get to around 4k life with really good gear. That's the Ascendancy for this build. Now the skill tree looks like this. I have the planner down below, Mobilitics, you can just copy it. I'm at level 88 currently. I will go over the best things about the skill tree and what you can do to enhance it even further with around 3 to 4 points. Now the first change is we get Adrenaline Rush for more movement speed. This is very, very good later on. Once you start to 1-shot packs or 2-shot packs, you just run around from monster to monster and have the additional movement speed as well as attack speed. Crossbow reload speed, we don't actually need that all that much anymore because we can get it on our gems. Like for example up here, this one. If we get 3 or 4 with reload speed, you can spec out those points right here and take those points to, for example, grab another jewel, or potentially path up here, grab a few more attribute nodes, a gem slot or a jewel slot, and this one for 3% movement speed as well as evasion. Pretty good one, especially if you respec out of those points. So you get 5 points additionally, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You get the jewel and then 2 additional levels to 90 and you have escape velocity. We grab Polymathy, really good one because you get effectively 3 strength and 3 dexterity, meaning +6 attribute points, and this one gives you even more strength, meaning even more HP. Very good cluster, but later on. So you are going to pick this one up much later in your progression. We path through the penetration here. Regular mobs, I feel like, have no resistances. If you find a mod on your maps that increases the resistances of mobs by 61%, or you're fighting pinnacle bosses, you're going to need the resistances. But on a 6th link, you're going to rock an exposure gem for lightning exposure. So you're going to lower the resistances of enemies anyway. And with the penetration you have on the skill tree, all around the skill tree here, you're going to get enough to just penetrate and lower the resistances to 0. Or on some monsters, because of the exposure, you're going to lower the resistances even further into the negatives. We have Maiming Strike here for maim, and we have blind here. So blind makes enemies less likely to hit, and maim makes them slower and makes you more likely to hit. We pick up the whole cluster here. The points here are much more valuable if you cannot reach specific points on the tree, like this one here. So those points are immediate power, and later on immediate power is really, really good. We pick up acrobatics now at around 14 or even 15k evasion. You don't need 20k. It felt really, really good and solid with 14.5 for me. Currently I am at around 20k, so this one is even better. With the setup, especially with after image, you get 8% more chance to evade melee attacks. If enemies swarm you, this one is really good. You get to around 71% evasion chance for melee attacks and 66% for AoE attacks and projectiles. So really, really good nodes. When we get to low life, we get additional evasion rating. So we can expect to go to around 75% evasion rating on most hits. And speaking of surrounded, you can potentially grab 30% here and here if you're surrounded. So if you get swarmed, especially in breaches, that's very often the case. Once there are multiple enemies around you, 5 at that, you're getting 60% evasion for free, which is extremely powerful. So those two nodes are very, very good. There is another thing you can optimize. You can take out those projectile damage nodes here. You can pick up attribute points for that. But we don't have too many increases to our damage. Those nodes are a substantial boost to our power. But if you find a weapon with elemental damage, increased elemental damage, you can take out those points, take the attribute points here and save on 2 points. Speaking of saving points, initially we pathed through here and grabbed the Unbound Forces. Unbound Forces is now allocated through anointment on our amulet. So we have this amulet with Unbound Forces. It's very cheap. The alternative to this one is to go with Wild Storms, but with our setup currently and all the magnitude to shock as well as magnitude to ailments you inflict, we get to the cap of 100% shock damage. So once we apply a shock, it increases the damage the enemy takes by 100%, which is insane. So we don't need the additional magnitude of shocks here. So those points are wasted. We don't need a penetration. That's also very weak. And those points are just traveling points. So we lose a few attributes, but that's okay. Instead, we are going to path through here and pick up maximum lightning damage. So this one is basically 15% more damage. Very, very strong node. Now let's go over the jewels. We have crossbow reload speed, magnitude of ailments or shock. Projectile speed is also pretty good because your shards from galvanic shards are going to fly further and hit enemies basically off screen already. So this one improves your clear speed and clear capacity. Then we have shock chance. Additional shock chance is very, very important on this build. If you have no shock chance, additionally, this one will feel sucky. You will not be 100% applying your shocks with your hits. Then 1 or 2 jewels with projectiles have an additional projectile when forking is really, really good for clear speed. Again, magnitude of ailments you inflict. Then I have 1 single jewel with 1% mana on kill. This takes care of all your mana during mapping. For bosses, you're going to need to chuck your mana potions. And then magnitude of ailments you inflict and crossbow reload speed, as well as a little bit of lightning penetration and duration of shocks. Next up, let's have a look at the gems. We're going to ignore the first one. Then we have emergency reload. They fixed the bug that you can have multiple emergency reloads, so that's off the table. With emergency reload, we are going to use premeditation, ingenuity, and persistence. So it's going to be a massive boost to our damage for our assault rifle shots. Then we have Stormcaller Arrow with overcharge and lasting shock. This is our shock application. Taking a look at the bolt, reads 800% more chance to shock. 100% of physical damage to lightning and 342. So basically this one shocks all the time. We're going to support this one with a 5 link with less duration or exposure for lightning. And the 6 link is the same, just the one you didn't pick. So once the Stormcaller Arrow shocks, it's going to expose enemies to lightning damage, reducing their resistances by 20. And it's going to need less duration to explode and apply the shock. You can stack multiple Stormcaller Arrows on enemies. So you are going to mark the target with take mark. And then you're going to shoot 1 or 2 or 3 Stormcaller Arrows at a target and it's going to shock them. Then we have Eldritch Blast, which we use all the time, basically never. This one is only here for when an enemy is going to charge up an attack that we know we don't need to dodge, or when an enemy is going to spawn. So some bosses allow you to charge up this attack. You can then shoot 3 beams and this is going to shock targets for basically 100%. If we apply the Voltaic Mark. Voltaic Mark is the next skill I want to talk about. We are going to also use lasting shock here, overcharge and scattershot. Scattershot allows us to fire 3 beams. Ideally, you want to increase the damage of this one somehow. But I'm using this one very rarely anymore. So Stormcaller Arrow should be the focus of your build. Then we have Herald of Thunder with concentrated effect, magnified effect, and innovate is big damage. With quality, this one gets more attacks. So 2 additional attacks. So very, very strong. Then we have Galvanic Shard, our bread and butter skill. With additional quality, we get additional ammunition to loads, so that's 7. We're going with primal armament, martial tempo, lightning infusion, and fog. Another support we can slot in here for more damage is heft or lightning exposure, depending on what you want during mapping. Both are roughly equal damage. This one increases the damage you deal, and this one is going to apply a resistance debuff on enemies, which is a more multiplier, so it's technically less damage. And this one is probably bugged because it reads physical damage per hit. They stated that physical damage scaled and then converted to lightning is not going to increase the damage you deal with lightning hits, but it does, so heft works. Then we have Wind Dancer for additional more evasion per stack. The quality increases the maximum stages by 1 to 4, so you can dodge more hits. Then we have Pin, so you're going to pin enemies with the attack Gale Force. And we have Cannibalism for 4% life recovery on kill during mapping, that's insane. Then we have Will Take Mark with Persistence. We're going to apply this one to enemies, and then we are going to just deal more damage with our shocks, or we have more chance to shock, and the effectiveness of our shocks is increased by 45%. Insane. It's really, really strong. Then our shock burst rounds. Sadly, the quality here doesn't work, so the bolt capacity stays at 19. If we do get the bug fixed, this one is going to increase in damage substantially because we don't need to reload anymore. We have concentrated effects. We have martial tempo for more attack speed. We have elemental focus. As someone in my comments already stated, payoffs prevent enemies from debuffing the consumed buff. This means the lightning ailment that's on the target cannot be reapplied by shock burst rounds, so the elemental focus skill gem is going to increase our damage for free. Then we have primal armament, and the last one is going to be heft. I have seen a few builds that are going to use Scattershot, but Scattershot decreases the DPS of the skill by a huge amount. Like, I'm not kidding. This is going to drop your DPS by more than half. It is so bad because you're going to shoot not 3 arrows or 3 bolts at the same time, but it's going to shoot 3 subsequent arrows. So it's going to skip your reload, which we build around, and it's going to shoot more bolts out of your magazines. It's going to go 1 bolt gone, 1 bolt gone. But the attack speed is going to be much lower and the damage is going to be much lower. Not a good fit on the build. Then we have Herald of Ash with Swift Affliction and Magnified Effect and Precision. Precision is kind of important on the build because we don't have much accuracy rating, and this one is going to boost that. But once we have our 4th Ascendancy, we can drop this one. You can also keep it to deal with evade enemies, your choice. Then we have Ripwire Ballista with Font of Rage. Font of Rage gives us rage generation once we stand next to it. It's going to increase our damage by a huge amount because it's more attack damage. However, rage is lost as fast as it's gained. And if you move just 1 step away from your ballista, all your rage is gone. And we have Font of Blood to regenerate our life a little bit during boss fights. I personally don't like using it, but if you can manage to always press it and have it near you, it's a substantial boost to DPS. Next, we're going to take a look at our gear, because the gear here is kind of important. First up, the chest. I went for a chest with 1500 evasion rating. This one cost me around 30 exalts. The previous chest I have been rocking, I can also show you. This is the chest. It had a ton of additional fire resistance with maximum life, dexterity and evasion rating. The dexterity you can find on both chests. And the most important thing here is the life. I bought this one with the cold resistance already slotted in. Otherwise I would have preferred to have additional evasion rating, 40%. It's going to be much better. Hopefully they will allow me to destroy the rune sockets here and then reapply them with evasion rating. The reduced attribute requirement can be important if you can get it on the helmet and on the chest. Then it's going to lower your dexterity requirements and you can go even lower. But the bow also has 139, so yeah, not all that important. With the setup, I already had enough evasion at around 15k. With this body armor, with this one, we're going to blast through the 15k to around 20k, and that's a 5 additional evasion rating. A huge boost to power. Next we have rings with evasion rating on them, maximum life and resistances to fix our resistances. Physical or lightning damage to attacks will boost your damage substantially, and increased rarity is also a very good way to boost your economy. On my second ring I found this one for around 10x, so this one is actually a steal. It provides us with strength, maximum life, a ton of rarity, a ton of lightning damage to attacks and elemental resistances. Additionally, the physical damage as mana is kind of okay because our galvanic shard, the initial shot, is going to only convert 30% of physical damage to lightning damage, so we are going to still hit enemies with physical damage, and that's going to leech. For our amulet, I went with a spirit one because it has a ton of elemental resistances, maximum life, and evasion rating. The percentage one is kind of huge. It's only giving you 1%, but that's actually kind of big. Then we have a belt. This one is very outdated. Life and resistances with a little bit of strength. For the gloves, lightning damage to attacks. Attack speed would be much preferable to, for example, the rarity of items found. The evasion rating here is not all that important. Lightning resistance, chaos resistance, also very good. Now, chaos resistance, as you can see, I have slotted it into the gem. I would much prefer to have this one on gear and cap my chaos resistance to around 50. With an amethyst charm, we can go to 75, and that's going to give you a huge buff to your survivability. However, after the patch, they nerfed chaos damage quite substantially, so I am fine with the chaos res I currently have, and I'm not getting one-shot by some explosions on the ground. Next, let's have a look at the weapons, because we're using two. First, the crossbow. Now, this crossbow has not all that much physical damage, because the elemental damage here is much more important. You can get to around, that's 570 or 600 elemental DPS, or total DPS on this one, with 150 elemental damage, I think. It's going to give you much higher top end damage, and that's huge. Additionally, you can find strength on your weapon, so it's going to give you additional life, which is also pretty good. If you can find a crossbow like this with attack speed, you are probably set. You don't need much else on your weapon. Attack speed is going to boost the basic attack speed of the weapon, which you boost with other attack speed more multipliers. So for example, martial tempo. Then we have a bow for our secondary skill. So that's the Stonecollar arrow. We want as much physical and lightning damage on this one as possible. This one was just found by me with reduced attribute requirements. I slotted in more lightning damage to increase the top end damage of this one. I have no idea how much this one will cost. Speaking of which, the other weapon cost me 3 divines. For the quiver, lightning damage as well, really good, and attack speed to make this one go off faster. There is another possibility to get a charm slot very easily on this class. Down here for 2 points, you get Hunter's Talisman plus 1 charm slots. With this one, I would advise you to go with a charm with freeze. I don't have one, but it's going to be the bane of your existence if you get frozen and then hit and you're going to die. So if you have a charm that's going to prevent that, that's golden, that's amazing. You will have a chaos resistance charm and a freeze resistance or freeze negation charm. Something else I want to talk about, one additional thing for the boss rotation. So we're going to apply the mark first on the target, and then we're going to shoot the bow 3 times, wait for them to pop for the shock, and then we're going to change to our shock burst rounds, reload, and that's going to be a huge burst of damage, around 1 million. Before that, at the start, you can also use your shock ballista to charge up the rage. So that's only possible if you have enough time. You're going to lower this one into the ground, then you're going to mark the target, shoot 3 times with your bow, and as you can see, the rage is going to deplete quite substantially and quite fast. Or you can charge up your big damage round. You can shoot 3 times because of scattershot. During boss fights, you're basically never going to load your galvanic shards. You're only going to load your shock burst rounds or your Stonecollar arrow. If the shock is going to drop off the boss, you're going to spam your bow attack until it's up again, and then you're going to use your shock burst rounds. So always make sure that your voltaic mark is on the boss. And that's about it. This sums up the video. This sums up the build. And if you have any questions, comment down below. Leave a like, leave a sub, and see you next time. Bye.